and welcome back to what should be the final installment of using up all these shell cutoffs I got from Nordic Drums late last year. So the first project I did was a 20 by 8 inch bass drum, and that turned out pretty good. And then the second was a 12 by 5.5 inch snare drum, which was a huge milestone for me because it's one of the first times I felt like I actually got cutting snare beds down pretty good. So very happy with that. And those were great shells to work with because they had a fair amount of depth. But this last one, which is the 14, only has like 2 3/4 or 3 inches of depth. So there's really not a ton of options here in terms of making a tom or any sort of conventional drum with a standard depth. I was toying around with a few other ideas, but the one that I really want to tackle with this is actually redoing one of my first drum projects I ever did on this channel, and that's making a pancake snare. Now, the drum I built back in 2020 was out of some cutoff from a floor tom, and the way that I did the snare mechanism on the drum was using an internal mount, but I really wish it had more conventional snares like you'd see on any other drum, which means you need a snare throw-off and a butt plate. Now, the drum I'm really looking at for influence on this is the A&F pancake snares that have been around for a while. They use this Gibraltar beer tap style throw-off and mount it to the hoop, which is a single flange hoop, which works really great because it has a flat surface on it, unlike normal triple flange hoops, which have a few bends and curves to it. I went ahead and ordered one of those beer tap throws, and it cost me about $50 after shipping from Good Hands Drum Shop in New York. Until that shows up, I want to do a little work with the shell and get the experimenting down on how thin I can make this shell so that I can still tension the heads tightly but have almost no gap between the two heads on the drum. All right, so that took like a couple minutes to get this thing all fitted up with heads, hoops, and some tension rods. And this is what I'm left with. There's like an 1 5/8 gap between not actually the collars of the heads, but the end of these triple flanged hoops. So that would be the max amount of space that I could take off of this shell and still be able to tension it fairly tight like I have it now. My hope is this turns out pretty cool, and I want to see what is the skinniest drum possible I can make with this thing. So I'm going to take it up to the garage, cut it down on the table saw, put on a couple bearing edges, bring it down, and see if it works. Well, I think I've succeeded in making this thing as thin as physically possible. It is 1 3/4 inches thick or deep, and if I tuned it up any more, these rims would be touching. I know the A&F version is 1.5 inches thick, but with the straight hoops, they don't actually overlap the collar of the head, so I think you have a little bit more clearance for tuning. I was able to tune this really tight, and nothing is touching yet, but yeah, I think this is as thin as this drum can be. There's a lot more tone now that it has bearing edges and that it has a flat edge on both sides, so I'm excited to see what this thing can do once we get the other parts in the mail. I'm going to need to cut some snare beds, and I may or may not buy a new bottom head because this is an old Rezo head from another drum I just ripped it off of, and it's probably a little bit stretched out. So hopefully that'll help with the issue of this being so close to bottoming out. But yeah, I think this is going to be fun. This is a tiny drum for sure. So I'm going to have to put this project on hold for a couple days while I wait for those parts to come in, but then we'll bounce ahead to that and hopefully get to playing this thing soon. All right, so it's finished, and it works. I knew this was going to be challenging, figuring out how to mount this throw off to the rim and make everything function. But honestly, the hardest part about this was just figuring out how to tie these dang wires around this throw off and get any sort of usable tension from it. If you ever have an opportunity to buy one of these drums that has this Gibraltar beer tap style George Way throw off, I'd highly recommend using something else instead. This is super frustrating. I had to do some digging online on some drum forums, and plenty of other drummers share this sentiment as well. Luckily, there is a video that Ron Dennett posted. I think he was somewhat involved with the design of it, but man, this would really deter me from ever buying a drum with this on it. So in the end, I was able to just chop out a little section of this top bend so that I could have this throw off stick in that spot. And then I was just able to file down the actual plate of the throw off in the angle so that it wouldn't get interrupted by this flange here on the hoop. I went to the hardware store and picked up a countersink head screw that I could use to attach this on here, just so that there wouldn't be any protrusion on the inside of the shell where I attached it on from. It works okay now. I was able to get it tuned up and holding a little bit of tension, but it's not very versatile. I also think that by cutting the snare beds, I removed even more depth from this shell, making it even tighter in terms of tuning. So you can hardly see that there's any sort of shell here at all. It just looks like two pieces of metal as this drum entirely. I'm not super happy with how this one turned out, if I'm being honest. I can't see myself using this very much at all. It's probably going to become more of like a brushes practice pad out here, or just something that sits on my shelf, honestly. But I am going to take it over into the studio, let you hear just a little bit of it. I'm not going to bother doing a bunch of tuning ranges because this is certainly a one-trick pony. All right, it doesn't sound too bad. It sounds like a drum, and a unique one at that. You may notice that when I did the off position demo, I actually had this butt plate strainer all the way loosened just to stop any snare rattle here. I'm definitely struggling to get this all balanced and working well, and I think that's how I'm gonna have to use it if I want to play in the off position, by taking this all the way back and then cranking it almost all the way up to get just that little amount of snare tension you heard. So still figuring it out. If you have any experience with this, let me know in the comments. I know I said that I wasn't gonna do any alternate tunings in this demo, but I figured why not throw on the big fat snare drum and just see how it sounds with that. I mean, that's okay. If I was looking for a low, deep snare sound, I'm not grabbing this drum. This thing is 1 3/4 inches deep. And I know that some people have really cool ways of tuning like piccolo and shallow drums to get a low, deep, fat sound. That's not me. So, do I think this project was a success? I mean, I guess so. This is a drum. It functions. It does what I wanted it to do. And I think I found a creative way to mount these snare throw-off and butt plate onto existing triple flange hoops. So in that respect, it does work. But, you know, I had higher hopes that this might sound a little cooler. Whatever, I'll move on. I'll try something different. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, so let me know in the comments, and until next time, thanks.